Knockout takes, Almunia saves, knockout follows in, Almunia saves again. You believe in miracles? Yes! Hard hit into right, back at the wall, tie game!
Hey guys, and welcome to Around the World Sports. My name is Aaron Shellen. Today, I am joined by lead fantasy football analyst for Fantasy Focused and sports anchor for Newsnet, Derek Tate. Join us and dominate your upcoming fantasy football leagues as Derek and I talk about past disappointments and successes, as well as some of the players to target and to avoid in this year's draft. Thanks for watching. Today, I am joined by the sports anchor for Newsnet in Cadillac, Michigan, and the lead fantasy football analyst for Fantasy Focused, Derek Tate. Derek can be reached on Twitter at DTater4. Derek, how you doing?
You know, it's great to be back on the mic with you. It's been a long time, my friend.
Yes.
Windy City Bulls type days, like back in 2018. It's great to see you, man. And I'm excited to talk a little bit of football, even though we don't have football quite yet.
Yeah, we did some Windy City Bulls together. We did some Lincoln Way Patriots action as well. So yeah, we go back a couple of years here, and you've moved on from Illinois to bigger and better things, and I appreciate you taking some time with me today.
I mean, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit of sports with you, my friend. I mean, it's an exciting time because for sports fans, it's a worrisome time, but there's hope on the horizon as we start to look at the NBA, the NHL, and the Major League Baseball finally getting to an agreement to a deal, and then the National Football League, obviously fantasy football is a huge passion of mine, but they just canceled the Hall of Fame game, which is not surprising, but hopefully it's not a sign of things to come with the coronavirus. Obviously the safety and of players, staff, coaches, all the personnel that go into conducting these games is paramount and comes first. But, as football fans, we're all sitting here holding our breath and cautiously optimistic we're going to have a season this year.
For this little segment here, we're gonna live in a little bubble, so to speak, and pretend that everything is gonna go off without a hitch, and come August 1, we are gonna be inundated with sports from all leagues. Sound good?
Oh, sounds great. Let's do it. Let's put on our hats and move forward, baby.
Sounds good. So, Derek, what I want to do is I want to kind of tap into your fantasy football background and expertise here a little bit, and we'll get into the upcoming NFL season here in a little bit. But first, I want to have a little fun with it, and I want to talk about the past. I want to talk about fantasy football, how you got involved in it, kind of where the passion, how you got hooked on it, and then talk about some individual players and seasons and things like that either made or broke your seasons, because we all have those players who cost us a title, and by the same on the flip side of that, we all have players that help deliver us a title. So I want to get into some of that stuff too. So let's start with kind of the beginning. So how did you get involved in fantasy football, and what was it about the game that got you hooked?
This is the part where you have like a little flashback scene in any sort of visual medium, but let me go ahead and paint the picture that my passion for football started when I was a kid. My dad really gave me no choice. He had me tackling couch cushions at the age of 3. And if I didn't run full speed, I'd get put on my rear end pretty fast from my dad, telling me, if you either hit hard or you get hit hard. So that kind of, logged my passion for football. But that carried right into, high school. I played a little bit of college football in my day as well. But once I got done with my playing days, I really found myself, starving to do something when it comes to football. Before I got into sports broadcasting, it was trying to be right. It was trying to tell everybody else, I know what's going to happen and you don't. So what's the one thing that you can do in a competitive aspect to basically show everybody that what's going to happen before it actually happens? That's playing fantasy football. Drafting players that are going to have a big season, or you have a feeling you're going to have a big year or something of that nature. And not only that, but the individual matchups. So that really started right when I finished playing college football. Is I had this large passion for it, filled a void of competitiveness when it comes to football, kind of combining those two things together. But when you talk about biggest busts and biggest home runs that I've hit, biggest league winners, or you want to call it. I'll start with the good. In 2012, I play in probably about 5 leagues a year, but there's always one that's near and dear to your heart. It's normally with the friends that you had back in high school that you played football with or you played sports with growing up. This is the league that I want to win every year. I want my name to be on the trophy. I want to hang it up on my wall. I want to walk around with it. And if I'm sitting in a booth by myself, I'll put the trophy at the other end. When I'm having lunch by myself, I'll even order it, a piece of cake, to celebrate, our championship. But in 2012, if you remember, that was the year that RG3 came into the league. And I actually drafted Robert Griffin III because, his athleticism coming out of Baylor was off the charts. But I remember the day of the draft, I saw this kid out of Florida Atlantic tear it up in a preseason game, and it was one Alfred Morris. He went undrafted. So later that day, the day of the draft, we were out and about at a bar in Tampa Bay, and I actually pulled out my phone, and I'm picking this guy up right now. I don't care. I like what I saw, and they don't really have an incumbent that I feel confident in, so maybe this kid can have a role. And lo and behold, he finished the year as a top 5 back in standard formats and helped me win a championship.
That's interesting. It always seems to be the running backs that sort of come out of nowhere. For me, we're going to go back a few more years. I got a few years on you here, but for me, it was 2000. Okay. I was in an ESPN league with some friends of mine, and about 2 or 3 weeks into the season, I picked up Mike Anderson of the Broncos.
Ooh.
And Mike Anderson in the year 2000 ended up putting up 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns. And I went 13-1 in the regular season that year. And eventually, I actually lost in the championship game. But that pickup is one that I will remember forever. Because of just the impact he had on my team. But it always seems to be that, because you never know with running backs, right? You never know, if the carries are going to get split, or, who's going to come out of nowhere, to put up 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns. So, that's Alfred Morris is a good one. He's had a pretty decent career here over the last decade.
He did. He had that good run there. I think that was first 3 years he ran for over 1,000 yards with the Washington Redskins. I mean, and for a guy that went undrafted and wasn't super athletic, but was just kind of a gamer, man, you could tell that he really paid attention and put in the work in the lab in the off season and knew he had a just great instinctive feel for the game. I mean, and it's funny you bring up the Denver Broncos, because that Shanahan system, not only was it Mike Anderson, but it was also like a Lindis Gary. Then you had Clinton Portis. I mean, anybody that they plugged and played at that running back spot in that system definitely seemed like they had like 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns by default. But the running back position has changed so much in fantasy football from the turn of the millennium with 2000, where you had pretty much your bell cow back that got 15 to 20 carries a game, and it's changed completely. Now everything is damn near a platoon if your name isn't Saquon Barkley or Christian McCaffrey. It's a different day and age, so you find a lot of gems at running back every single year. Guys that go undrafted seem to have some sort of significant impact.
Yeah, I mean, unless you are, unless you're picking one of those 2 top backs, and this will get into our all-time busts here in a second. But unless you're picking one of those top 2 or 3 backs, it's not a sure thing anymore that your first round pick is going to be a running back. I mean, you're just as likely your top pick is going to be one of those top wide receivers now, because like you said, those carries and those touches are just split between 2 and sometimes 3. You look at a team like the Patriots. I mean, they run out 3-4 running backs, and you never know who's going to get the ball on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, New England's been that problem. The one constant has been Tom Brady under center, but outside of that, fantasy performers have been relegated to either the slot receiver in Wes Welker or Julian Edelman. Of course, you had Gronk, but the backfield is we've seen Lawrence Maroney come and go. We've seen the likes of Sony Michel have here and there games. I mean, Oh, what is the name of the player that scored 4 touchdowns
Jonas
and then
Gray.
was inactive the next week? I forget his name. His name is slipping my mind, but
Jonas Gray was his
that's
name.
it. Jonas Gray, man. I thought he played fantastic. And then he missed him, came up short for a meeting or something like that. And boom, he's inactive the very next week. The Patriots backfield is, trying to figure out, the Dark Lord Sidious, Bill Belichick, and what's in his mind as a weekly game plan is it's damn near impossible.
Yeah, well, that's another connection that you and I have. Me being a Patriots fan and you being a Buccaneers fan.
Oh, yeah.
Tampa's quickly turning into New England South. So actually, this whole state of Florida is, when you factor in the Dolphins and Tampa and sort of the Patriot flavor those teams have. So it'll be interesting to see how the longtime Patriots impact your dear Tampa Bay Bucks, for sure.
I'm surprised you don't have a Brady Buccaneers jersey hanging in the background.
You know what's funny is I do actually have, and here I'll show you this really quick. Hang on. I bring this up as part of I have this as my work background for Zoom.
Okay. Yes.
So I figured you of all people would appreciate that. So
he looks good. He looks real good.
Well, that's a whole nother conversation for another day.
Yeah, no, I got it.
Let's talk about. So we talked about those that one player that kind of sticks with you as a non-drafted or a midseason pickup. What about the player that you picked, in the first round and you expected to carry your team and things just went the opposite direction?
Same league. I think it was 2017. And I was in pretty good shape because I had that's a keeper league, and I had a very good keeper. I think it was like David Johnson after his all-pro season in 2016. I was like, man, if I can just pair him up with another stud running back. So, there were some interesting running backs that were already off the board. But I was super high on Jay Ajayi after he had a breakout season in the back half of 2016.
Right.
I think he had like 3 games where he rushed for over 200 yards, and he looked like a monster. And I was like, dude, this guy could blow up. Because I didn't see anybody else challenging him for touches there in Miami. Jay Cutler went there, and that ended up J.H.I. didn't even finish the season on the Miami Dolphins. He finished with the Eagles that year, and that was a disaster. I took him at I went on a limb and took him at number 4 overall.
Oof.
And boy, that was an absolute disaster. Like, David Johnson broke his forearm in week number 1. I was the bottom dweller of the league. I finished like 11th, but out of 12. But oh man, I was given a hard time the entire year because that was actually the rookie years of not only Christian McCaffrey, but Tyreek Hill. I drafted both of them in the 2nd and the 3rd round because I was very high on both of them. And they both showed glimpses, but they didn't have those full breakouts yet. So
they weren't McCaffrey and Hill yet. Yes.
Yet. They weren't there yet. I was ahead of the curve, and I was right, but it didn't come together that year, and my team ended up looking like hot garbage.
It's funny you bring up David Johnson because I had the number 4 pick in last year's draft, and my thought process, and maybe had I talked to Mr. Tate and the team over at Fantasy Focus, they could have directed me in a different way. But my thought process was Kyler Murray, gonna be a very good, very mobile, very talented quarterback, but he's gonna be a rookie, and rookies tend to gravitate towards those outlet valves, towards people that they feel safe with. And I figured in a PPR league that David Johnson would blow up as Kyler Murray, with Kyler Murray as his quarterback. I took David Johnson with the number 4 pick, and the rest, as they say, is history. By midseason, he wasn't starting, and by the end of the year, he wasn't playing at all. And I wasn't able to find somebody to fill that void, and I started the season off pretty well when Johnson was healthy. He went down, and I think I finished 4th or something in a 12-team league, but when your number 4 overall pick gives you absolutely nothing after like week 5, that's a tough pill to swallow.
It's even tougher when you swing and miss in the first round and it has nothing to do with injury. It's one thing if he blows out his ACL or has a season-ending injury and you know that it happens. It's football. You have to move on.
Right.
But to have him on your roster and to see him put up these duds and then to see that Kenyon Drake just straight up deboed the position from him when he got to town from Miami. And speaking of which, we'll talk about potential breakout players. Kenyon Drake, spoiler alert, he's going to be on one of my breakout candidates for this year. But yeah, the fact that David Johnson just got completely played off the football field. I know he suffered a little bit of an injury and Chase Edmonds had a couple good games, but when they traded for Drake and they were both healthy, Drake just completely outplayed David Johnson. Yeah. And don't worry, the Cardinals, all they got in return was DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And that's again, familiar face in a new place is, it's going to be interesting. We talk about Brady and Gronkowski and Hopkins. I mean, those are three of the kind of the most iconic players in the NFL in the last decade, and they're all in new homes this year. So, I do
have a question for you though, real quick. What's the most lopsided fantasy trade you've ever been in a league that you've seen happen?
Ooh,
because it happens, man, where you start here. There's a fine line between collusion and I think that accusing someone of colluding with another owner, that's like shaving points for a football player. That is just an unspoken, do not go there type of unspoken rule there in fantasy football. But there are some trades that people legitimately, in their mind, think that their team is getting better. So you almost can't veto the trade, and you have to allow a person some freedom to run the team that they want, how they want to run it. But have you ever seen a trade that just made you go, what in the world were you thinking?
I can tell you, and I'd have to go back and look at the specifics. I remember, I'm in my mid-40s, so my memory is starting to go here a little bit. But there was actually a trade this past season in the keeper league that I'm in that we as a league ended up vetoing. And I'd have to go back and look at the exact information, but I want to say it included Mahomes. And I don't remember what was going the other direction, but we all looked at it and went, yeah, this isn't happening. Like, you guys are either colluding or we're protecting you from yourself. One of the two.
That's not, you hate doing it. You hate having to do something like that. But I mean, occasionally it does come up. One that didn't get vetoed, and it's in a dynasty league, which means, I don't know if you play any, it's similar to a keeper format, except you just keep your entire roster, till the league dissipates or ends or whenever.
Right.
So last year we were in the rookie draft, and some unnamed jabroni gave up Derrick Henry, who ended up being a top 5 running back, for Nelson Aguilar and Paris Campbell. That was it. And Derrick Henry's side gave up a future first-round pick.
Was this before the season started, or was
before the season started? Yes.
Okay, I mean, I guess you could make an argument somewhere that nobody could see Derrick Henry having the kind of year that Derrick Henry had last year.
I get it. I understand, but Derrick Henry and a first-round pick,
right? I mean, it's
Nelson Aguilar and Paris Campbell.
I would say it's
close. It's borderline
at best, at absolute best. Sure, even Derrick Henry circa last year or the year before that is especially if you're in a PPR league. Derrick Henry doesn't have the value that he would have elsewhere, and I don't think anybody saw the kind of year out of coming out of Derrick Henry that what you got out of him. But still,
I mean, he had a historic run there at the end of the year.
Yeah, but even still, Henry and a first for Aguilar, who is at best number 3. At best.
This is a standard league too.
Yeah.
This isn't PPR where Derrick Henry's at a significant disadvantage because he never catches more than 20 passes in a year. It's
in a non-PPR league, Derrick Henry has a lot more value because, the ultimate goal is yards and touchdowns and that sort of thing. But yeah, that's a rough one, man. Did it go through?
It went through. I mean, because unfortunately it was the commissioner that was a part of the trade. And look, I don't want, again, a man has a right to go ahead and manage his team however he sees fit, as long as there's no clear evidence of collusion. That is my belief when it comes to your team. It is your team. There are reasons why there are bad NFL franchises because owners run their team very poorly. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So, I mean, the same should apply. If you're paying to be in the league, you should be able to run your team the way that you want to be able to run it. But I mean, that trade to me was devoid of logic.
Yeah, and I guess the strategies and things like that are going to be different in a dynasty type league where you're keeping your entire roster. Decisions have to be made. Are you heavy at running back? Are your
right?
Is your quarterback position getting old? You have to start planning for the future. So I could see trading Henry if you're picking up a young wide receiver or it's future assets that maybe can help your team down the road, just like a real rebuilding team would do.
Correct.
They trade their older players for draft picks and future talent, but to get back an equally aging wide receiver as the key component of the deal while also giving up a first round pick. Yeah, I hope that owner got a stern talking to from the rest of the players.
He's picking first in this upcoming rookie draft.
That's not a surprise. That's not a surprise.
Rough year for the guy. It's kind of like fantasy karma came back to bite him, and it's a first round pick that he doesn't have. So
he gave up his so those picks aren't even protected. So that makes it even worse.
Oh yeah, I mean he did it to himself. Yeah. I mean, and it is what it is. Of course, hindsight is 20/20. If Paris Campbell would have blown up and Aguilar would have had a nice year and all that stuff, I'm just saying that if you named, even heading into last year, if you named those three players, who was the most valuable? Easily, it was Derrick Henry. And then you not only did you give up Derrick Henry, but you gave up, high draft capital along with a, borderline running back one heading into last year. And now, of course, it looks even more lopsided than it did back then. But anyway, I was just a thought coming up, like, big mistakes. Those are mistakes that happen in leagues on a yearly basis that when you're in the league, you're kind of like, well, there's nothing I can do about it unless I'm part of the trade.
Yeah, and all owners kind of have the there's the selfish part of it too. If there's a team that you're battling with position for in the league, and all of a sudden they're picking up Mahomes, or they're picking up Travis Kelce, or they're picking up George Kittle or something like that. You're like, man, I really want to veto this trade. I can't allow this to happen, but you gotta, the Patriots can't stop the Bucs from making deals to improve their offense at this point. So,
like trading a fourth rounder for a retired tight end. Absolutely.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, on the surface, that looks like a steal for the Patriots, no doubt. But yeah, I have a feling that one's going to work out just fine for the Bucs. Gronk is, when he's happy, he is something else. So, let's talk about kind of overrated and underrated, but not on a year-to-year basis. Is there a player on kind of both sides of the spectrum that kind of religiously either goes, picked higher than they should or lower than they should?
So for the past couple of years, even though I see how immensely talented this young man is, I'm going to say he's overdrafted, because I don't think he's overrated. I think he is actually a very, very, very good player. And he reminds me a lot of a more athletic version of Lev Bell. That's Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals. When I watch him play and he has competent blocking in front of him, the dude is an absolute stud. He easily, in the right situation, could be a top 5 fantasy back. So, but every year people are taking him on that ceiling, that potential. And you see people reaching on him in the first round every single season because they expect the talent to eventually catch up with the perceived production. And that just isn't the case. It hasn't been so far. Is this the year that he could break out? Yes, it could. But every single year, man, everybody just overlooks the fact that the Cincinnati Bengals have had major issues on the offensive line, major issues as far as on the defensive side of the football, giving up a ton of points on a per game basis. And they still have Giovanni Bernard, who was a pass catching specialist. Every single year, you overlook that in the hopes that the talent produces like you think it could. And it definitely could, but it's just every single year you have to take into account the players that are around these guys in their situations, not just the talents. Same thing with maybe like Odell Beckham Jr. Dude has all world talent, and every single year, people remember the first 3 years that he had the National Football League. That dude has not been the same over the last 2 seasons. He just hasn't. And what has changed? They picked up an offensive-minded coach in Kevin Stefanski that they're going to be able to run the football like they did in Minnesota last year with Dalvin Cook. Now you've got not only Nick Chubb, but a former rushing champion in Kareem Hunt as the number 2. You added Jedrick Wills, and you also got the offensive lineman from the Tennessee Titans as well. So you've shored up that offensive line, and you got a lot of talent on the defensive side of the football, yet people are still drafting OBJ in the 2nd round and expecting him to return on that freakish ability that he's displayed, but it's been inconsistent. And he really hasn't been able to stay healthy either. I mean, it's OBJ and Joe Mixon are the 2 guys that come to mind that you're paying face value, top shelf price for as far as draft capital, which we haven't seen it enough to really justify being taken where they are every single year.
And in both of those players you mentioned, the other thing that you need to take into account, right or wrong, the other thing you need to take into account is the other stuff that goes along with drafting Joe Mixon and OBJ. And Mixon has a history of off the field issues, we shall say. OBJ is, he's a great football player when his mind is right. But you have to wonder, there was talk last year about him wanting out of Cleveland or potentially being traded from the Browns after a really short amount of time. So you have to take that into account too. Is Mixon going to potentially run into off the field issues? I mean, he's been fine since he's been in the NFL, but he had some issues in college, and OBJ is seemingly one of those players who's at a different level when the mind is right. So you have to wonder which versions of these players you're getting as well.
So when you bring up Joe Mixon in particular, it harkens back to maybe someone like Tyreek Hill, who had documented issues back in their collegiate days with domestic violence or certain altercations and issues with the law. Granted, I mean, Tyreek Hill had an issue that the NFL didn't end up suspending him, so they concluded their investigation saying that there was no wrongdoing or not enough evidence to really be able to punish Tyreek Hill. But I understand what you're saying when it comes to taking in off-the-field factors that come into investing that high a draft capital on a player like Joe Mixon, even though in the NFL he's had no issues. Right. So, but when it comes to Odell Beckham Jr., it's interesting because it's not like he's ever had run-ins with the law or anything like that. I mean, I've seen some social media posts that make me scratch my head. I've also seen him give cash to LSU players on the football field after winning a national championship, which, I mean, come on, dude. Like, you went to LSU. Like, you got to be happy for your program. You're there clearly supporting them. You don't think that might get them in a little bit of hot water if you are sitting there giving cash money to players with cameras pointing at you in all 360 degrees? I mean,
use your head.
He's a smart, well-spoken young man that his decisions don't always line up with the intellect that he has displayed. It just, I mean, Odell, I don't want to call him a head case, but like you said, it seems like if his head ain't right and he ain't fully happy off the field, then it trickles onto the football field.
Yeah, he's, wide receivers in the NFL have long been known as divas, and OBJ kind of fits into that world. So what about the other side? Who are players that are routinely underdrafted?
The guys that get no love. I think you're going to see a guy like Adam Thielen, who I know he had a rough year last year, but he got hurt. He was hurt, and not to mention now Stephon Diggs is out of town, right. And Diggs wanted out of there last year, and I mean somehow they hosed the Buffalo Bills. into giving up a first-round pick for a guy that requested on Twitter to be traded. It's unbelievable. And DeAndre Hopkins went for a second, but I digress.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Which one was worse? Yeah.
But I digress. But when it comes to Adam Thielen, I think Thielen, I mean, just 2 years ago, man, he had a stretch of 8 straight games with 7 catches and 100 or more yards and a touchdown to start the year. I mean, this dude can still ball out. I mean, yeah, Justin Jefferson's on the other side, and they're still going to be a team that is primarily built through running the football. But if they're going to be throwing the ball, you're going to see a ton of target volume for someone like Adam Thielen. And one other player that I want to mention, and he's there in Chicago, Allen Robinson, dude. AR-12 is a stud. I love Allen Robinson, and I think that you saw what he fully is last season with Mitchell Trubisky under center. You never knew which Mitchell Trubisky we were going to get on a week-to-week basis. Normally, it was more bad than good, but we still saw Allen Robinson put up a top 10 PPR year, and I don't know what you need to see from the guy. And whether it's Foles or Trubisky under center, we've now seen Allen Robinson put up top 10 seasons with the likes of Mitchell Trubisky and Blake Bortles as his quarterback when healthy. So I love me some Allen Robinson, and I think he's chronically underappreciated at the wide receiver spot.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that people are assuming that his output will be stunted by the fact that he's got Trubisky throwing him the football. And there's a lot of hate in Minnesota about Cousins and the amount of money he's making and that sort of thing. But Kirk Cousins, I mean, he's put up the numbers. I mean, the stats are there, the yards are there, the touchdowns are there. And I think you're absolutely right. With Diggs being gone, Thielen is going to be that go-to guy for the Minnesota offense. And he may not the numbers, I think they'll probably even out, because when you got Diggs on the other side, that forces you to either single team Thielen or you single team.
Oh, right.
You can't double team both of them. So I think Thielen's probably going to see more defensive attention than he was seeing with Diggs being gone. So the numbers may come down a little, but now he's going to be the main target.
More volume, less efficiency.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then like I said with Robinson, I mean, if he can perform with Trubisky under center being as inconsistent as Trubisky was, if Trubisky can take a step forward, or if he doesn't take a step forward and Foles comes in and can just be a little bit more consistent, who knows what the ceiling is, for Robinson, assuming the Bears have somebody else on that offense that can take some of the pressure off.
Well, I mean, we've been waiting for me personally. I was in love with Anthony Miller when he came out of college, when he came out of the University of Memphis. I saw a lot of playmaking ability and route running ability from the young man. And it seems like he'll flash a game here or there, but it's hard to predict the Bears offense, what any of their production is going to be, because you have Matt Nagy, who can't make up his mind whether he wants to actually run the football at all with a struggling quarterback and a great defense. Just wrap your mind around that when it comes to his offensive philosophy. He's supposed to be a genius, but I see a lot of concerning, patterns when it comes to his play calling. But when it comes to Allen Robinson, I think what was proven last year is that he is the focal point of this passing attack, and they didn't really add anybody else to significantly take away his base volume of targets and work in the passing game. And the one thing that's good about Nick Foles being in town is if Mitchell Trubisky struggles, then you have a competent backup quarterback that can come in and at least give you the same level of play, if not higher than what we've seen from Trubisky throughout his entire career.
Absolutely. So is there, and I don't want you to give away any trade secrets here, and I certainly don't want you to shorthand yourself in your own drafts, but is there a player, like for me, I try not to be one of those fantasy football players that overdrafts players from the Patriots, because they're my team and I want to root for my team. And I see it all the time here, people taking, the Bears players, before they should, or taking certain Bears players at all. Is there a player that you can't that you can't quit? Is there somebody that you inevitably ends up on your team every year?
It depends on what round you're talking about. One player that ends. I mean, I play a lot of fantasy football, so I have a lot of shares of players.
Yeah.
One guy in particular, though, I mean, that's a little bit tricky. I always seem to wind up with Devonta Freeman on my teams a lot of years. That's not going to apply because he's not even on a team this year, but I have to give him a shout out because I believed in the kid coming out of Florida State, and I reaped the benefits of his breakout year in I think it was 2015. So Freeman was somebody that was always kind of near and dear to my heart because he was kind of an underdog coming out of Florida State. I mean, he was a 4th round pick, and then I think they took Tevin Coleman the very next draft in the 3rd round. So there was a chance that we never even saw Freeman get an opportunity, but then he got his chance in 2015 and just blew up and had a pretty good career there with the Atlanta Falcons. But yeah, he was a guy that wound up on a lot of my teams year in, year out. And he didn't have a ceremonious end last season, but he's certainly been a guy that's been on my teams a lot. But this year, I mean, Josh Gordon too, when he was heading into every year, man, every single year, I fell in love with that 2013 season that he had with the Cleveland Browns, where he led the league in receiving yards in 14 games.
With Derek Anderson as his quarterback.
Oh, my. Yeah, I mean, that and Brian Hoyer, I think, played a couple games too. I mean, it was – Josh Gordon he's going to be a what-if story, even if he does get reinstated. He's a guy that I've always been like, oh, well, now he's got a chance. Now he's got a chance, and it's just never come to fruition. He's been a guy that's broken my heart on a bunch of occasions. But
for me,
that's unfortunate.
For me, it's Julian Edelman. I can't quit Jules. I find a way to get him on my team. And I mean, that's really the one, there are certain players on if I could take Rob Gronkowski in any round and people would, they wouldn't give me a hard time for it. But Edelman is that one player. I absolutely love Julian Edelman. On the field, off the field, I think he's, the definition of an underdog. I mean, he was a quarterback in college and, went in the 7th round and he's become, not only Tom Brady's best friend, but he was his most trusted receiver for the better part of a decade.
And can you believe that Mitchell Trubisky's been to more Pro Bowls than Julian Edelman has?
It's absurd,
sickening.
And he's one of those players, and this year might be a little different, or it might be more of the same with Stidham at quarterback, and again that rookie quarterback looking for that safety valve and that player that he feels comfortable with. So I think you're going to see James White, Julian Edelman, kind of reaping those benefits of kind of being those check downs and the players that Jared Stidham kind of relies on. But you knew what you were going to get from Jules. You knew you were going to get anywhere from 80 to 100 catches, 1,100 yards, 7 or 8 touchdowns, which, as a wide receiver 3, I mean, you're not going to get much better than that.
Wide receiver 2, I mean, his value was always very, very, I mean, he put up wide receiver 2 numbers consistent. Like he was like the take it to the bank PPR. He's catching 5 passes for 55 yards at a minimum. He's going to get you those splash games where he gets you 20 or 30 fantasy points because he catches 11 balls for 102 and 2 tutties. Right. I mean, he was just a guy that was as consistent and reliable as you could count on. And I actually see a lot of Cooper Kupp in Julian Edelman and his pairing up with, look at what he did last year coming off of an ACL tear, and there's no Brandon Cooks in town now.
I had both of them last year. Kupp was probably my best pick. I got him in the mid rounds, and I paired him, Edelman, and Stephon Diggs. Those were my top 3 wide receivers. So I was pretty solid there. But again, David Johnson at the number 4 pick really did a number on me.
I know. You can hit on all of them, but if you miss on that running back one, that's a tough hole to fill.
So let's. But
I mean, Robert Woods. By the way, both of those Rams receivers this year, I'm all about. 2 thumbs up because no Brandon Cooks. Both Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp are going to have very nice seasons.
So that kind of leads me into this season a little bit. So give me one sleeper and one bust.
I mean, do you want him at each position or you just want one?
Just give me one. Give me one player that you would stay away from, and then one player that you think, is just going to have a breakout season.
Leonard Fournette is the one I'm staying away from because there is a lot of writing on the wall when it comes to the Jags. They don't want him to be a part of their future moving forward. They did not. I mean, Cam Newton is still a free agent, and they've got Gardner frickin' Minshew under center. I'm not talking trash about Minshew mania. I get it. He was very good. I thought he was very good considering the circumstances that he walked into last year as a rookie. I thought he played his tail off, but they are not setting him up to succeed. And they just declined Leonard Fournette's fifth-year rookie option, which means this is his last year in Jacksonville. I mean, not only that, but of all the players that saw 250 or more carries last year, only Derrick Henry saw an 8-man stacked box more than Leonard Fournette. And Fournette only seeing the fact that I think he touched the ball like 341 times. He scored 3 touchdowns last year. They brought in Jay Gruden too. This is an under the radar thing. And these 2 moves also spell doom for Leonard Fournette's fantasy value. Jay Gruden was the head coach in Washington before he was let go midway through last season. And he brought Chris Thompson with him. And Chris Thompson, for each of the last 5 years, caught 35 or more passes. Leonard Fournette saw 100 targets and caught 70 balls last year. There is no shot in blue hell that Fournette is catching that many passes this year with Chris Thompson in town. No way. Jay Gruden trusts Thompson in passing situations, and you better bet your tail when the Jags are playing from behind, which they will be often with all the defensive talent they have offloaded this offseason. The writing is on the wall there for stay away from Leonard Fournette.
Gotcha. I will remember that without question. And then a sleeper, somebody that's going to go under the radar or that's posed to have a breakout type season.
I'm going to give you 2 because I can't just give you 1.
All right,
actually, fine. I'm going to give you 3 because
Three's
I can't.
Fine.
I'm going to give you 4. I'm going to give you 4. I'm going to rapid fire him because I have to do it at every.
That's fine. Perfect.
Your boy believes. All right. First at quarterback, Carson Wentz. They added speed. Speed is what you need. We need greasy, fast speed. If you know Rocky Balboa. Yeah. So what they brought in Quez Watkins, Jalen Reagor from TCU, a healthy Deshaun Jackson. We saw what Deshaun Jackson can do paired up with Carson Wentz. Wentz throws one of the best deep balls in the entire National Football League. He's got 2 of the best tight ends that demand attention underneath from safeties. If you try to single them up, Ertz and Goddard will eat you alive. They have a nice offensive line in front of Carson Wentz, and as long as he can stay healthy, he is going to be dropping deep balls all over the place. I think Wentz has incredible upside considering where he's going in fantasy drafts at quarterback. Give me your thoughts on that. Do you see that as a? Yeah. I mean, some people don't believe in Carson Wentz.
No, the big thing is whether or not he can stay healthy. I mean, right. That's always been the thing with Wentz. I mean, it's hard to believe that just a little over a year ago that there were Eagles fans that were out there clamoring for Nick Foles over Carson Wentz. And a lot of that was Super Bowl hangover and whatnot. But I mean, Deshaun Jackson is another player that I had on my team last year, and I had a good first couple weeks until I think it was actually just a good week one. Yeah, good week one. And then he went down, but. Yeah, it's always that wide receiver position has been a problem for the Eagles for seems like since Mike Quick back in the 80s. So the fact that he now has 3 or 4 solid wide receiver targets, he's got 2 very, very good tight ends, which is how the game is played these days. You can't just have 1. You need 2 to really make it work. And so in a running game that is, not going to blow you away. So all of those things I think line up to, if he stays healthy, sure, I can see him having a great season.
And then at running back, so this is not going to be, the first one I'm going to say is not going to be a sleeper, but I'm very high on Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of LSU, who the Kansas City Chiefs took in the first round. His only competition is Damian Williams. And look, Damian Williams is no scrub, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire caught 55 passes and at times looked like the best football player on the field. And that's considering with Joe Burrow, who set the single season record and had the best season any quarterback in college has ever had. You turn on that Alabama tape, though, he dominated that football game, catching passes and running the ball on the ground. For that offense, which is just basically a track team, and with Patrick Mahomes at the helm, I mean, we could easily see Clyde Edwards-Helaire, putting up great PPR numbers. But really, Raheem Mostert is the sleeper guy at the running back spot. Now, can I go deeper and say, one of the committee guys? I could, but, right around that 5th, 6th, you're getting him at the right price tag. So Mostert, the 49ers finished 2nd in the league in rushing per game. Mostert scored a touchdown each of the last 6 games of the regular season and was the primary ball carrier in the postseason. He took the job from Tevin Coleman. Right. So they traded away Matt Breida. So I think this lines up well for Mostert to be the lead back in a Shanahan system with the best play caller in the league in Kyle Shanahan, with a team that primarily wants to run the football. I mean, yes, there's going to be Coleman's going to get involved and maybe probably another third back here and there because that's just the way of the NFL. But Mostert is going to see enough touches to be fantasy relevant this year.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, he got rid of some of his competition, and he was somebody that was very sought after mid-season. I mean, people were scrambling to pick up Mostert mid-season. So, last question I have for you, Derek, is what tips would you give somebody who is new to the world of fantasy football and doesn't want to make a complete fool of themselves?
So we're going to do a how-to series, how to play fantasy football. And it's going to be for beginners over on the Fantasy Focus YouTube channel. So go ahead and check it out if you haven't gotten a chance to. But the best bit of advice that I can say is don't necessarily worry about filling out your starting roster immediately. The basics, go running back early. Wide receivers, get about 5 or 6 total of them before you start addressing the quarterback and tight end positions. Now, look, if you're in love with Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes or Rob Gronkowski, any specific player, get them. It's your team. You want to cheer for your team, and that's totally fine. Right. But don't panic if by the 6th round you don't have your starting tight end yet. Just continue to take running backs and receivers, load up there, and then quarterbacks and tight ends you can stream. Generally, if you go that route, you will have a competitive team.
Excellent. So, Derek, you mentioned your Fantasy Focus YouTube channel. You want to just take a minute and kind of let everybody know the different places that they can find you and they can find your content. Sure. Because fantasy football is a multi-million-dollar business, and everybody's looking to get a leg up. So, where can they go to find you?
You can find us anywhere, really when it comes to podcasting, that's our main platform. So you can find us however you digest your podcast, whether it's on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. You can find us on any of those platforms for the visual formats and for our live shows. We really go live every single weekend, but we do a lot of DFS stuff. We have a new partnership with a company called Monkey Knife Fight. I know that DraftKings and FanDuel are kind of the daily fantasy sports kings right now, but you should check out Monkey Knife Fight because they have daily competitions from everything when it comes to sports to even esports, man. I haven't gotten into the esports stuff yet, but if you are down with League of Legends and all the other games that they do competitions for on Monkey Knife Fight, use the promo code FOCUS. You actually, when you make a deposit of $50 or more, you actually get an additional $50 credited to your account automatically. So it's pretty cool, man. We're going to be doing a lot of great stuff over at the Fantasy Focus channel, but mostly we stream live on YouTube on the weekends for the fantasy debate with Sam and Tate, and our normal Fantasy Focus live show where we basically do answer DFS questions and your matchup questions every Sunday at 11 a.m.
Awesome. All of those various places will be in the links below down here.
Yeah, did you get all that?
Yeah, I'll watch the video 3 or 4 times, and I'll make sure I get everything listed down there so that people can check you and Sam and the rest of the Fantasy Focus out. So yeah, if you're looking for the inside scoop on fantasy, the world of fantasy football, Derek and his team are the place to go. So Derek, I appreciate your time today, sitting down and talking to me. It's always fun to kind of suspend reality for a little bit, right? And that's really what fantasy football is naturally, but especially now, being able to just kind of, bury your head in it and really just kind of pretend that everything's normal, if only for an hour or so. So yeah, Derek,
all the fantasy lifestyle, baby. You gotta stay fantasy focused. Fantasy football, man, always it's like my solace, my place to go to unwind from reality. And just in my own world, I have a stacked dynasty fantasy football team that I'm very proud of.
Awesome. And that's the way it should be. I mean, we're all in some ways proud of our fantasy football team, even if nobody else wants to hear about it. So, Derek,
right. I mean, it's like your dog. Like, no one wants to hear about your dog. I care about my dog, but right. I don't want to hear and see pictures of your dog. I'm kind of like indifferent about it. But my team, I could talk about all day, and I love it.
You got it. So, Derek, again, thanks for your time, and everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Once again, that was Derek Tate, lead fantasy football analyst for Fantasy Focused and sports anchor for Newsnet. You can find Derek on Twitter at DTater4, that's DTATER 4, and his Fantasy Focused team at Fantasy Focused with 2 Ds. All this information will be posted below. Audio recordings of this and all of my other interviews can be heard anywhere podcasts are found. If you've got suggestions for upcoming interviews or feedback about interviews I've already conducted, I can be reached on Twitter at SportsGuyAaron, and I can be found on YouTube and Facebook at Around the World Sports. Thanks for watching.